to Egypt. Joseph was on the way to Egypt. As the caravan journeyed southward towards the border of Canaan, the boy could discern in the distance the hills among which lay his father's tents. Bitterly, he wept at the thought that a loving father in his loneliness and affliction. Again, the scene of Dothan came up before him. He saw his angry brothers and felt their fierce glances bent upon him. The stinging, insulting words that met his agonized entreaties were ringing in his ears. With a trembling heart, he looked forward to the future. What a change in situation from the tenderly cherished son to the despised, helpless slave. A lesson is here for parents. Even if we have children who may be very dear to our hearts, treat all your children equally. It wasn't his fault. We know the story of how, daddy was very happy to have him. But we see where this caused problem amongst the children. You can't have a special one. All of them must be a special one. Even the one that take after you that give trouble. Because sometimes we think that the children who give trouble is must somebody else to take after. But it's your genes, huh? And I am quick to admit that my daughter, who will give me the most talk, is the one who is just like me. But we know that it is not me who will make the difference in her life. It is Jesus who makes the difference. And if it were not for Jesus, I would not be here standing before you. Brethren, it is Jesus why some persons can take set on me now and I don't do anything, huh? And I tell people sometimes, some of the people we take a lot of set on, is the love of God why they don't dust out some of us? Because Jesus makes the difference. And so as Joseph was now going, it says this experience was to be a blessing to him. He had learned in a few hours that which years might not have otherwise taught him. His father, strong and tender as his love had been, had done him wrong in his partiality and indulgence. The unwise preference had angered his brothers and provoked them to the cruel deed that separated him from his home. Its effects were manifest also in his own character. While Joseph, according to scholars, is the only person who many persons equate with Jesus, there were several things that were similar in his experience with that of Jesus. We find that there were problems which, if this had not happened, would not have been corrected. Faults had been encouraged that were now corrected. He was becoming self-sufficient and exacting. Accustomed to the tenderness of his father's care, he felt that he was unprepared to cope with the difficulties before him in the bitter, uncared-for life of a stranger and slave. But, brethren, then his thoughts turned to his father's God. God makes the difference. In his childhood, he had been taught to love and to fear him. Often in his father's tent, he had listened to the story of the vision that Jacob saw as he fled from his home, an exile and a fugitive. He had been told of the Lord's promises to Jacob and how they had been fulfilled, how in the hour of need, the angels had come to instruct, comfort, and protect him. So my first point with Joseph, although he had lost his status, he never lost his faith. I encourage you to think about where you are with God, whether you be a child, a teen, a young adult, or a more mature person. Many times we are looking at other people, but daily we should look at where am I with God. If the same thing that got you upset in 1999 still getting you upset, you are not yet converted. If certain challenges are still getting the same results, it means you have not grown in Jesus. And so every time in church should be a time when I reflect not on the other people, but on my relationship with Jesus. Because in the end, It's not going to be about the brothers and the sisters. It's going to be about me and Jesus. And as we think about going out to minister to others, I must know about the Jesus that I'm going out here to talk to people about. Rahab lived in a country where there was a lot of things happening around her. But when she met the men from Israel, she could tell them that she knew about their God. Amen. Sometimes we are talking to people about a God that they can see that we don't know. Do you know the God of Israel? Don't worry about, if people see you at night or all of that. Remember that Jesus seen you at night. So if I am worried only about what other people think, that is not the important thing. And you and I need to reach to the place to know it's not what the elders think about you or the pastor or certain people think about you. It is what Jesus thinks about you. And don't bother to spend your life trying to tell people certain things. You just know what it is with you and God. Amen. Because when it boils down to gravy, that is what is important. And many of us are distressed because of what people think about us. You go up and you make a grammatical error and you might not come back to church for 3 weeks. Yes, I'm an English teacher and I make mistakes at times. Sometimes, brethren, I have to stop. One day I could have spelled thee. It was just not coming. I know it's maybe old age, maybe a senior moment, but I couldn't remember and I had to look. There are times I have to draw from a dictionary. I am not ashamed. And praise the Lord for Google. You can get almost anything I want. I can go on YouTube. And brethren, my point is, sometimes we allow simple, stupid things to get between us and God. And who wins? The devil wins. We are in a world, as we talk about being in a world. I heard that it was said some time ago that this big star went somewhere to some children the other day and told them that if they pray to God and he doesn't answer their prayers, they are to pray to Satan because he will answer their prayers. We are in a world where people think some of us are very stupid. Do you know that? And many of us get offended, and brethren, it's not everybody believe what we believe. And you have to know that. But you must know what you believe and live what you believe. And so when Joseph reached to a place where his brothers had sold him and sent him somewhere, he felt that at a point that God had forsaken him. But here, even in his distress, in Genesis 37, 21 to 22, we see where one of his brothers intervened. Was that God's doing? Yes, sometimes when things happen to us and, even some persons come to our defense, we are surprised. This is why you must live right no matter where you are. So even sometimes people who seem to be your enemy will stand up for you. Because they know, although they don't like you, you are somebody who stands up for what God's word says. And that's why as God people, we can't be bandulu and jinal. Some people know us as the biggest bandulu and jinals about the place. Or people that rent we don't want to pay it, Tell people to work and then tell them it's Sabbath evening. You can't pay them. Pay the people. We are to do what is right and don't bring disgrace upon God's church. Judah decided to sell Joseph as a slave. That was God working out his plan for Joseph. Sometimes even at our workplaces, you're doing so well and you should get the promotion. You don't get it. But sometimes God has a better promotion for you. Sometimes it's to help you. Because there are some of us, if we ever get the US visa, Jesus don't see us again. If some of us ever win some big money, even our accent would change. And so sometimes we wonder and we start to feel bad. And don't you sometimes things are working out. Even the appearance of the Ishmaelite traders was God working out something for Joseph in Genesis 37:28. And can I tell you that the fact that he was sold to Potiphar Was God working out a plan? You know, even the other day I saw it as I saw an animated version of Joseph. Did you know that the fact that Joseph was sent to prison when Potiphar's wife accused him proved that Potiphar knew that his wife was lying? What was to happen to Joseph? He was to be immediately killed. Brethren, sometimes God is working out his plan for you, and you cannot fathom it, and you get miserable, and you think that you want to go to St. Thomas to go get a bath, or go somewhere else to go get a bath because cross is following you. Sometimes it is God working out his plan for you. But you have to know him. You have to be familiar with him and know that his ways are what? Past finding out. So it may seem as if nothing is happening for you, but God is setting everything that it will work out for you. Joseph might have been a slave, but he was safe in the arms of divine providence. Second thing about Joseph, Joseph remained humble and a man of integrity. Brethren, you can imagine how we could have had nice time with Potiphar's wife. The man was in charge of the household, basically, you know. And sometimes things come our way. You need to pay the rent, and they ask you to hold some money for them, or, you know, you're asked to maybe, you know, collect the money, and you're to take it somewhere, and it drop out of the vehicle because it dropped into your hand. Because the temptation came and you were not able to deal with the temptation. Brethren, we are going to be tempted. But can I tell you that Jesus has made a provision for us to come out of the temptation? You can be tempted, but you don't have to yield. And so you may be at work and something goes wrong where you could get a little thing. And we are living in a country where corruption is rife. But I'm happy that I have brothers and sisters that are standing up for what is right. And some persons have lost their jobs because they wouldn't do what the bandula want them to do. Sadly, there have been persons who may have lost their lives because they don't want to do what is wrong. But if we die in Christ, we are given the assurance that we'll rise with Jesus. Bridget, that is a tough one to take, isn't it true? Yeah. And this is why, you know, when a child asks, where is a loving God? When I've had persons no longer believing in God, I don't get at them. I keep praying for them and I encourage them as best as I can. Because, you know, I think a little bit of it came out this morning. Sometimes it is, you know, it's not so easy when you have on the shoes. And things really rough. When a young man lost his daddy, and a few years later, as he became so close to his mommy, his mother got sick and died. And he stood up at the funeral and said, where is a loving God? How could a loving God do this to me? What do I do in my righteousness? Call him a blasphemer? No, he's hurting. And family ministries, sometimes we have somebody sitting right beside us who is hurting. And sometimes we don't even see that they're hurting. But it's not easy all the time to confide in people. But if somebody confides in you, keep their confidence, all right? But each of us need other people to talk to. And that's why I think sometimes God makes me can't remember certain things. Seriously, because I'll see people years after. They say, remember when I spoke to you? Because God needs us to help each other. And when we come to church, we come to get the love to take us for the next week before we come back, or when we come Sunday night or Wednesday night. So this is why here should be a place where we can get solace, where you can have smiling faces. And even if I sinned to the uttermost in the week, I can come and know that there is forgiveness. Because until we get to the place where we're sinning and it is nothing, brethren, we can still get forgiveness. But if I'm sinning and it is nothing, it means that I'm heading into trouble or I've reached into trouble. So this is why we come to the cross. So Joseph remained humble and a man of integrity. And this is why he prospered and was elevated and even sent to prison, because we know that really he should have been killed. You know, the greatest part for me in this story is that Joseph learned to forgive. Brethren, can you imagine people sell you? They said awful things to you. And sometimes we have to go through that even in our families and church. Isn't that so? Sometimes the worst experience, I've gone to funerals and see family fighting. And then you hear who fighting over dead left and who this and is who caused it and is who hobby. All kind of stories happening. Because sometimes some situation brings out the worst in us. And Joseph had to deal with his brothers. And for those who don't know, if there's anybody here who doesn't know, there's a point when Egypt was in trouble. Because Joseph had been brought to the place because God had a plan for him in Egypt. And when Egypt was in trouble and the king Pharaoh called for him, Joseph told him how they could save not only themselves and other countries, because God knew that there was going to come a time when Joseph's family was going to need help. And he was going to use the very Joseph to bring them help. And so as they came for food, they found that Joseph was there, and Joseph sent for everybody. And Joseph had gotten such a reputation. And brethren, wherever you are, stand up for the right. Because as I read this last part of Joseph in Genesis chapter 50, I realized that the people, not only did his people love and respect him, but the other people loved and respected him. And so when he sent for all his family, and they came down to Egypt to live with, and they lived a wonderful life. He took them into his home. But you see, when you have done evil, sometimes it comes back to haunt you. And his brothers, although Joseph had done all of that, as far as they were concerned, Joseph was only doing nice things to them because of their father. So when their father died, they started to fret. And here they start to ask now, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him? And so they were so afraid, they sent word to Joseph, hear them to Joseph. Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father. And brethren, when Joseph got the message, he wept. Can you imagine? Why did he